stadiums themselves, I mean, we've seen, maybe it's an interesting segue here, but we've seen it with clubs that have moved to bigger stadiums, and then actually they've become less competitive because of it. I mean, look at I mean, maybe that's something now that won't need to be the case of feeling you have to have this massive stadium, because it won't be all about fans being in the stadium for a while. It's going to be about sponsorship and making sure that there's value to, I guess, a freemium model of this streaming matches, and then premium tiers within it. Something that you sort of see within, streaming services, whether it's TV like Netflix, whether you see it in music like Spotify and Apple Music, these kind of things. Maybe we're going to go to that model for a while. If this does take a good few years before mass gatherings can happen like this again. If you look at, for example, Arsenal were dominant team at Highbury. Mm-hmm. They moved to the Emirates Stadium. Even that alone, having your stadium named after a brand, they were one of the first to do that. Yeah. Definitely one of the more high profile to do that. But actually, Arsenal stopped winning trophies when they moved there.
Arsenal are a funny one because their models just all over the place. They put a cap on ticket prices, so every year they lose money from the year before, where every other club can increase their ticket price, so whether they do it yearly or whatever. They put a 5-year cap on it. Is it a 5-year cap? Where the ticket price doesn't go up. And then their
ticket prices are one of the highest in the league anyway, are they not?
Yeah, they are.
So they,
but your away supporter go in there, you normally get a shock.
What? So they made a lot of money initially, but that bracket kept closing, and then their money, they rely heavily. So their balance sheet a few years looked very profitable. It looked like they had 80 million in the bank, but after EBITDA, so earnings after interest and tax, they were like 20 million in the red.
Yeah.
After that, the only real place that they could find money was in their dealings. They had to sell a player for a profit. And they did that initially, but then they didn't have any more players to sell.
Like, they got 100 million for the deal they did with Emirates. For that, they got 15 years for the naming rights for the stadium, but I think they also got 7 or 8. It was either 7 or 8 years as well for the jersey, but 15 years for the stadium. They got 100 million.
Doesn't sound like a lot, does it?
And again, if you think how much that stadium would have cost them, I mean, like I said, that's when they started selling. Look at the players that left at that point. I remember the first one was like kind of really hit home. It was Nasri, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think it was Sammy Nasri went to City and Van Persie to United, and then that one really really stung for them. They had to clap him as he came back as a Premier League winner as well, didn't they?
City not ended up buying about half of their squad over about
they had a few.
3-year period.
I think Nasri was the first, right? But then who else? Yeah, they had
Bakary Sagna went there.
Adebayor.
Yeah.
Adebayor. Bakary Sagna.
There's another one that really sticks out that left them.
Gael Clichy?
Nah, Fabregas, but he went to Barca first, didn't he?
Yeah.
But
but he went to Chelsea.
But he went to Barca first, didn't he? Then came back to Chelsea. Yeah.
When the Van Persie deal happened, that's when it kind of, thinking back, was the bigger shock. So nowadays, you will not see clubs in the same kind of league position swapping players. You just won't see one club buying another club's top player when they're in a similar league position. So, say Aguero's about to go, they probably won't sell him to a Chelsea, not Chelsea, but do you know what I mean? They probably won't sell him to a top 3 club because
City also have such a strong financial position. I think at that point, see, you mentioned Van Persie. I don't think that was a shock because I'd already had the shock of him when once City came and took Nasri. Nasri was a big player for Arsenal at the time. And just the fact that City could take him, I was like, well, that's so. Well, by the time United and City
were direct competitors, whereas Man U and Arsenal were at the time. City weren't that club yet, were they?
No, they won the league that year.
That year, they won the league.
Yeah, and then the year after, United won it back with Van Persie. So Arsenal, I'm sure that City bought Nasri that year. It might have been the year before. I feel like it was that year.
It
And
was
then
round
City,
there anyway.
yeah, and City won the league, and then they sold Van Persie to United. United won the league. So by the time United came and took Van Persie, who City were fighting out, I was like, well, yeah, one of us will get him, because they've just shown that the season before, because they didn't want to sell Nasri. And what had shown is that they no longer have the power in the negotiation, because they need to fulfill the debt of this stadium. This is stadium. And it's not a surprise that they won a trophy since they've been in the Emirates. They won a couple of FA Cups towards the end of Wenger's time, didn't they? They won a couple of FA Cups. They back-to-back FA Cups. They won.
Yeah, I think
Ramsey late winner.
It's
Yeah.
Say again, sorry.
Wasn't that when the whole thing became finishing top four as an achievement? And I understand why they did it, because the Champions League money is substantial, and as soon as they lose out on that, they're even more in the red. So they are a club that to trade anymore. Even the signing they got this year, remind me the guy's name, but they spent 70-odd million.
Nicolas Pepe.
And then they spent so much because they couldn't pay for him. They had to pay him for him in installments, and that's why they have to. Like, imagine being a club that touts yourself as the top four club, and you're having to.
That was really funny. Do you know what I mean? We've got a direct debit.
That's exactly what it was. They could have afforded
it nowadays then.
Sorry?
No, I mean, no. You normally got a fee up front and then these additional add-on bonuses. But now, literally, the fee up front was paid. What would have originally been the fee up front was paid in installments. They had to literally do it on. It was like.
Barcelona's been doing that for years as well.
Have they? Maybe it's not new in football, but it was interesting for me, for a club that's always said they've got no money, to go and spend 70-odd million. And then I was like, how are they spending 70-odd million? And then it comes out that they actually didn't spend a penny. They're paying for it over time. Yeah. It might not be the first club to do it, but it was just a surprise where, like, that's the level that they're at. Whereas Arsenal are probably one of the biggest clubs in the country.
Interests me there, sorry, you bring up Barcelona. I think they're an interesting club in this topic. They're a club that they've got an incredibly good PR team, because they wouldn't be brought up into that conversation. But they're an interesting one for the way they were with UNICEF. The way that they were like, we promote UNICEF, and they almost have been kind of one of the last famous clubs that didn't want to sully themselves with that world of, as they see, cheating the brand and all that sort of stuff. But then they got 232, or they stand to make, I think it's 232 million over the next 5 years from their sponsorship with the Qatar Foundation. So actually, Barcelona, when these clubs that kind of said they don't do it, but actually,
they definitely do.
You've got a great PR team, Barcelona, because you don't think of them that way. But even Barcelona now are in the game, and they were the last club.
This conversation, looking at the Deloitte Football League, like the top, like
top earning clubs.
Yeah, and there was a comparison of 2010 to 2009 and what's shifted in the last 10 years. And Real Madrid and Barcelona are 1 and 2, and they were like 10 years ago they were 1 and 2 as well. These clubs make a lot of money, and I always argue with Cuzzy and Wham about this, that the Spanish league's a dead league. Like, they've got 2 clubs that win everything, but other than that, they've got nothing. Atletico as well, I understand, but they've got no depth to it. Like, if you see them playing against a team that's sitting 17th in the league, you probably couldn't even name the team. You couldn't probably name a player on that team. Whereas Premier League, that isn't a case. Like, you could, like, even when Fulham got relegated, they were still banging in goals. They were still, like, they just conceded more than they scored, but they were still scoring goals, and they were still a threat to other clubs in the year they got relegated. So even when Leicester survived relegation the year before they won the league, like, that recovery was incredible. But that's why Barcelona and Real make so much money, because you almost really don't have anyone else to support.
But also
they've had their own TV channels and TV deals, because they get loads of TV money compared to the rest of the league. Whereas in the Premier League, it's all split evenly between all 20 teams. Over there, they can negotiate their own TV deals.
Right.
So they make fortunes from that as well. Which
There's
obviously
also a
doesn't
magic attached to certain names of those clubs as well. I mean, it's what makes the Champions League so special, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? The idea, the romance of drawing Real Madrid, Barcelona, even I wouldn't say so much Juventus, but the names of the Milan clubs. I know they've maybe gone through harder times, but there is a certain. I guess it's one of the things that comes up towards the argument always brought up about the idea of like a Super League that brings these. This was one of the things that's always brought up because imagine those clubs being in a league that's competitive every year. Can you imagine what that would be like? And then
I almost feel like the money that's in football is pushing us closer and closer to that. Then last year, Liverpool, Man City, in probably I feel the best league in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
probably one of the best. 1 and 2. Number 2 was 25 points clear of number 3.
Mm-hmm.
So these clubs have spent money. Okay, Chelsea were third and they did spend money. But there's a couple of teams almost in every league that are running away with it. So then it becomes a bit of a, what are we fighting for third place here? Because those two teams are so good. That's why Simeone, I love Simeone. Because he's the only guy sticking up his finger to Real and Barca.
I think the big difference with England is the fact that if you go in 5-year blocks, you'll probably see that kind of pattern, but it could be different teams that have done it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you do look at Spain, it tends to, it's always them two. And so, you're not going to see, whereas, you've seen at the moment, you're seeing if you look at the football money era, that really does come down to predominantly Man United and what happened in the 90s is why United are so big. But then you look at United now when they're not even in the top 4, which is mad. And you look at Liverpool that used to win so much and then they went 20 odd years, often some years not even being in the fight for the top 4. It's what's so mad about it is that any one of these Goliaths at any point can be ripped out and someone else will take the place. You don't really see that in Spain.
But that's because there's new money.
Even Atletico have been there now pretty consistent for a good while.
I like Atletico. I like them. Yeah. If I would ever move to Spain, that's the team I'd support. But the
dead football though.
Yeah, Simeone,
dead football. It's just spoiling the party. But he's spoiling it for Real and Barca, so it's kind of funny. But do you know what I mean? It's dead. It's dead football, man. Like Mourinho should definitely go there.
The thing with it is that the changes you're talking about, Mikey, that has been in football because of money, though. In the Premier League, that's because of money. Like City weren't there until the money came.
No.
So
how do we feel then about clubs that are, again have been labelled financial dopers, financial fair play, this sort of thing? The Manchester City situation, for example, right now. Do we feel that actually it should be anything goes when it?
I think
I switched it there. But should it be that's the issue, or should actually be a regulation in place to stop teams?
I think the financial fair play. I don't think it works.
There's an argument both ways because if you think about it, financial fair play in theory, it's a level playing field, but we never all started on a level playing field. Right. So all it's doing is keeping the top teams at the top.
Totally.
So, I mean, in theory it works, but in practice, I don't think it works as well as it's intended to work, if that makes sense. Because you would end up with the likes of your sort of global big brands like your Liverpools, your Man Uniteds, your Arsenals to a certain extent. Chelsea certainly wouldn't be where they are now without Abramovich's money. I mean, they were doing okay before it, but they certainly weren't top 3, top 4 every year. Man City would probably still be.
They've become the third best team in the country just before. But yeah, they weren't there all the time. But they were usually third between United and Arsenal. They had Zola and Vialli and Di Matteo, and they'd become a good team, Chelsea. But you're right, they were a team that would win a cup, and they would usually be round about third. They had who was the manager before the money came in? I know they had the Hullet team, and then they had the Vialli team. The Vialli team had become the third best team in the country at its point. But if you go back 10 years before that, they were a mid-table team.
Yeah, exactly. I think a London club can do okay because the draw of a footballer living in London is actually quite big. So that's why Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Arsenal, they can still sign a big name.
It's with Chelsea as well. It's the King's way.
How
and
did
that sort of
Crystal
stuff.
Palace get in the same company as Chelsea and Arsenal there, by the way?
Okay, maybe Crystal Palace, but they're a Premier League team. They're a Premier League London team.
Well,
So
Crystal Palace are from Croydon, bruv. Do you know what I mean? Croydon's a different energy, man. Croydon's all right, though. But it's a different energy
I just think
to Fulham
they
Broadway.
probably hold on to Zaha. What I'm saying is that they probably could hold on to Zaha. He might just be like, look, I like living in London. Until a London team comes calling, I'm not going anywhere. So
Well, that's why he wanted to go Arsenal, didn't he?
Yeah.
He wanted to go Arsenal, and he couldn't wait to get back home from United because he just wanted to go back to South London. He wanted to go South London, so maybe he's really now to branch up to North London, but he ain't going up north. You know what I mean?
Coming back to the point, I think the money could create a Super League, and I would I would watch it. But I've got a lot of friends who are like, nah, I'd actually stop watching football if that happened. That blah, 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 it goes against everything. But and they get really passionate about this not happening. But I think I'd tune in even more. Like, imagine watching like a league with like top 8 clubs in Europe, and you're just like, right, this is Champions League every week. But those clubs probably will change every year on year. It probably will change.
Interesting point with that, Ali. Then, what would draw the top 8? Because one thing I would say, and I want you to follow up on this in the Scottish special.
Right.
If you were to put Celtic and Rangers out of a small league into a big pond with their fan bases and their history, would they thrive? Given the fact that their limitations are the pool they're in, right? The SPL.
Yeah.
You were to put Celtic with, let's look at Celtic. We can get into Rangers, I'm sure the fans will on the thing. But if you get into the Celtic fans, what is Celtic's fan base like in South America, in places like Boston, in the States? If you look at that, you look at the fan base, it's insane. If you were to put Celtic into an environment where suddenly they could attract big players because the league wasn't a put off, the Celtic technically can say, well, we could be one of those top 8 if we were in the conditions to thrive like that. Or they see that it opens up a different can of worms. What do you judge as being the super clubs then? How would you get to that? How would you get to that?
Top leagues, top 2 or 3, or
of the already existing leagues.
Yeah.
But we're forming a new league, so why is that determining it?
Because
is it not the size of the club's potential if they were in a Super League? Was that not?
Very interesting debate, Mikey. I was just going to give it to like Juve, like a few clubs from Britain.
So you basically have all the Champions League last 16 in it.
Pretty much. And I'd let them thrash it out, and then they would still play their FA Cup, like Champions League.
I think there's a more holistic way to go about it. I reckon you need to. Yeah, I don't think you just go. The league exists. Here you go. Let's go. You'd have to have a phased approach into it. And I think you'd have to have a way of going, clubs earn the right to fulfill the criteria. And I think one of the things you'd need to do is almost allow big clubs from leagues that don't have the same TV money, that don't have, because let's be honest, what happened to Scottish football was that, again, I referenced the 1992 deal with Sky. That deal shafted Scottish football.
Yeah.
Shafted it. Let's call it what it was. Shafted is what that was. Right. The second that happened, if you go back before then, they used to have like these epic Battle of Britain matches, didn't they? Where like, like Aberdeen versus Leeds and these and it's amazing how often the Scottish teams came out on top. And of course, they may have wanted to do that even that little bit more. But the point is, they had the players, they had the coaches, and they had the ability to punch above the weight. And then the Premier League deal happened, and all this money went to all the English clubs, and then. Who really goes and plays in? I think there's been the Rangers teams that went on 9 in a row to the O'Neill team and Celtic. They were still maybe riding the wave of when Scottish football was still able to have some bigger players. But even at that point, there were players that, if a player became big there, where did he go? Premier League. Who went there? Players that were no longer quite good enough for the Premier League. So really, if we're going historically, then we should look at, there should be some way of going, well, how does actually this become fair? Because the whole point is, why should the old league system that you're trying to abolish determine what happens in this new league system as opposed to supersede it? I don't think that. I think you build something
the only caveat to what you're saying, Mike, is I don't think a league administration is trying to create the league. I think the clubs are trying to create a league, and the clubs are like, it's a walkout. So those clubs are just taking their buddies. They're not looking at Celtic. They're not looking at, a team from the Serbian league.
Those clubs are also thinking that, we'll create this league and we'll not have any relegation or anything like that, and it'll just be us, and it'll be a money spend. Whereas in terms of UEFA and FIFA and all this, they'll want it to be like a competition.
Correct.
Where it's a competition rather than just throwing money at.
I mean, do you even go full American with it and look at a draft system? I mean, it opens up so many different scenarios, because you're going to go, well, how do you kick this off right? Because the thing is, again, if you get some sort of body around it, whether that ended up being FIFA that decided they were going to pull the finger out their ass and take control of this, or whoever it is, they'd be like, well, you want the clubs with the most potential in. So, for example, would you want a Celtic and a Rangers? Well, all the trouble that brings with it, it's a different question. So the Premier League's always been like, well, we don't really want, we have enough political stuff and without throwing sectarianism into the mix, you know what I mean? But again, these clubs have got the potential to be global giants. Would you want the clubs that essentially what's the main thing these clubs do is they draw the crowd in. And these
How do you decide which clubs take part in the Super League as well, or which countries, if that makes sense? Because there's going to be years where, if there is like a promotion and relegation system, then how do you relegate somebody from Scotland and then promote somebody from, I don't know, Bulgaria, or like a Red Star Belgrade or somebody like that? How does that work?
I generally think you need to base it on a number of things, not just results in competitive leagues. But I think you'd have to look at things like literally, obviously how financially successful the clubs are comes into it, how stable they are, how big the fan base is, how big they're in, what are the social media followings. You'd have to literally use analytics to determine this.
Because the whole reason we're having this conversation is because of money in football. And this league would only occur where the money was. So if MK Dons could sell out a stadium and command the money and buy the players and all that kind of stuff, then they'd probably be in there. But the thing is, they don't. Celtic's an interesting one because they do have a following globally, and they do have they probably could get money together, and
they just shackled by the league they're in. Who wants to go and play in that league? Really? But if Celtic win the Premier League, they thrive. They maybe not thrive. They have to evolve the playing style. They'd have to, not with the current squad, but I'm talking about that infrastructure with time to grow into that setup would become a global giant, because it would have.
I think if they went into the Championship next year, I don't think it'd be long before they're in the Premier League.
No.